In the heart of Africa, there was a small country called Columbia. It was a land of beauty and diversity, where the sun shone bright and the people were warm and welcoming. But Columbia had a dark secret, one that had been hidden for years. Frempoma was a young journalist with a passion for telling the stories that needed to be told. She worked for a small newspaper in the capital city of Bujumbura, where she had grown up. Frempoma loved her job, but she knew that it wasn't easy. In Columbia, the government controlled all the media, and anyone who dared to speak out against them was silenced. One day, Frempoma received a cryptic tip about a series of suspicious disappearances in the countryside. She had heard rumors of people going missing, but no one had ever been able to prove anything. Frempoma decided to investigate, and she began by talking to locals who might know something. The villagers were tight-lipped at first, but as Frempoma continued to press them for information, they began to open up. They told her about a group of men who had been seen in the area, wearing black uniforms and carrying rifles. They said that these men had been taking people away under the cover of darkness, and no one knew where they were going. Frempoma's curiosity was piqued, and she decided to do some digging. She spent hours poring over documents and talking to officials, but every door she tried led to a dead end. It seemed like no one wanted to talk about the disappearances, and Frempoma began to wonder if she was getting close to something. As she delved deeper into the mystery, Frempoma received threats from unknown sources. She found strange messages on her phone, warning her to drop the story. But she refused to back down, convinced that the truth needed to be told. Frempoma's family began to worry about her safety, but they also respected her determination. Her father, a high-ranking official in the government, warned her to be careful, but Frempoma knew that he was just trying to protect her. Her mother, on the other hand, encouraged her to keep going, saying that the truth would set her free. As Frempoma continued to investigate, she began to uncover some disturbing secrets. She discovered that the government had been secretly backing a rebel group in a neighboring country, called Vutonga. The rebels were fighting against the government of Vutonga, but Frempoma suspected that there was more to it than just politics. She met with a local activist who shared her passion for justice, and together they began to build a case against those responsible for the disappearances. They scoured the countryside, gathering evidence and interviewing witnesses, but every step forward seemed to lead to more questions. One night, Frempoma received a phone call from an unknown number. A voice on the other end told her that she was getting close to something big, but that she needed to be careful. The voice warned her to drop the story, or else she would regret it. Frempoma knew that she couldn't back down now. She was determined to uncover the truth, no matter what it took. But as she hung up the phone, she felt a chill run down her spine. Who was on the other end of that call? And what did they want from her? The next day, Frempoma received another message, this time in person. A mysterious woman handed her a folder containing documents and photographs, telling her to be careful and to stay safe. The woman disappeared into the crowd before Frempoma could ask any questions. Frempoma was torn between curiosity and fear. She knew that she had stumbled onto something big, but she didn't know what it was or who was behind it. As she delved deeper into the mystery, she realized that she was in over her head, but she refused to back down. Frempoma knew that she had a responsibility to tell the truth, no matter how difficult it might be. And so she continued to investigate, following every lead and interviewing every witness she could find. As the days turned into weeks, Frempoma began to uncover more evidence of the government's involvement in the disappearances. She discovered documents showing that the government had been secretly funding the rebel group, and photographs of people being taken away in the dead of night. But with each new discovery, Frempoma felt like she was getting closer to danger. The threats from unknown sources continued, and she began to feel like she was being watched all the time. She knew that she couldn't trust anyone, not even her own family members. One day, Frempoma received a message from an old friend, a journalist who had gone missing several years ago. The message was brief and cryptic, but it sent a chill down Frempoma's spine. It read, "They're watching me too. Be careful. Frimpoma knew that she couldn't keep running forever. She needed to find a way to expose the truth and bring those responsible to justice. But as she looked around her, she realized that she was completely alone. The government was watching her, and so were the rebels. Frimpoma felt like she was trapped in a web of intrigue and deception, with no clear escape route. And then, just as she thought things couldn't get any worse, Frimpoma's phone rang. It was a call from an unknown number, but the voice on the other end sent shivers down her spine. "Frimpoma," it said. "You're getting close to the truth. Meet me at the old windmill on the outskirts of town if you want to know what's really going on." The line went dead, leaving Frimpoma feeling confused and frightened. What did the voice mean? And who was behind the mysterious message? Frimpoma knew that she had to be careful. She couldn't trust anyone, not even herself. But at the same time, she felt a sense of determination wash over her. She would meet with the mysterious person and find out what they wanted. As she walked towards the old windmill, Frimpoma felt like she was walking into danger. The air seemed to grow thick with tension, and the shadows cast by the trees seemed to move of their own accord. But she refused to back down. She knew that she had a responsibility to tell the truth, no matter what it took. And so she walked towards the windmill, her heart pounding in her chest. As Frimpoma approached the old windmill, she couldn't shake off the feeling of unease that had been growing inside her since she received the mysterious message. The windmill stood abandoned and still, its wooden slats weathered to a soft gray that seemed to blend seamlessly into the surrounding landscape. Frimpoma hesitated for a moment, wondering if she should turn back. But something about the message had resonated with her, and she felt an insatiable curiosity driving her forward. She took a deep breath and stepped inside the windmill, her eyes adjusting slowly to the dim light within. The air was thick with dust, and cobwebs clung to the wooden beams that stretched out above her like skeletal fingers. Frimpoma coughed, covering her mouth with her shirt as she looked around. The interior of the windmill was small, with a single door on one side and a narrow staircase leading up to a loft area. As she waited, Frimpoma heard the sound of footsteps echoing from the staircase. She turned to face the doorway, her heart racing in anticipation. A figure emerged from the shadows, its features obscured by a hoodie pulled low over the face. "Who are you?" Frimpoma demanded, trying to keep her voice steady. The figure pushed back its hood, revealing a young woman with piercing green eyes and skin that seemed to glow with an otherworldly light. "I'm someone who knows the truth," the woman replied, her voice low and husky. "And I think you do too." Frimpoma's mind was racing as she tried to process what was happening. Who was this woman, and how did she know so much about Frimpoma's investigation? "What truth?" Frimpoma asked, trying to keep her curiosity in check. The woman smiled, a small, enigmatic smile that seemed to hold 1,000 secrets. "Come with me," she said, turning to lead the way up the staircase. Frimpoma followed, her heart pounding in her chest as they climbed the creaky stairs. At the top, the woman pushed open a door that led out onto a narrow balcony, overlooking the city below. Frimpoma felt a rush of wind as the woman opened the door wider, revealing a breathtaking view of Bujumbura's sprawling metropolis. "We're not far from the city center," the woman said, gesturing to the sprawling landscape below. "But we're not in the city anymore. We're in a place where the rules don't apply." Frimpoma felt a shiver run down her spine as she gazed out at the breathtaking view. She had always known that Bujumbura was a city of contradictions, but she had never seen it like this before. The woman followed her gaze, a small smile playing on her lips. "You see, Frimpoma," she said, "this city is full of secrets. Secrets that are hidden in plain sight. Secrets that only a few people know about." Frimpoma felt a surge of excitement as she turned back to the woman. She was getting close to something big, and she could feel it. "What do you mean?" Frimpoma asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The woman leaned in close, her breath tickling Frimpoma's ear. "I'll show you," she said, her voice low and husky. "But first, we need to get out of here." Frimpoma nodded, feeling a sense of anticipation building inside her. She knew that she was taking a risk by following this woman, but something about her seemed genuine. As they turned to leave the balcony, Frempoma saw a group of men waiting below. They were dressed in black uniforms and looked like they meant business. "Who are these guys?" Frempoma asked, feeling a surge of unease. The woman followed her gaze, a small smile playing on her lips. "Just some friends," she said, winking at Frempoma. "People who want to help us uncover the truth." Frempoma felt a shiver run down her spine as the men began to move towards them. She knew that she was in danger, but something about this woman and her words seemed to hold a strange allure. As the men closed in, the woman reached out and grabbed Frempoma's arm, pulling her into a narrow alleyway between two buildings. They ran, their feet pounding on the dusty ground, as they disappeared into the crowded streets of Bujumbura. Frempoma stumbled, her heart racing in her chest. She had never run so fast in her life, but she knew that she couldn't stop now. As they emerged from the alleyway, Frempoma saw a taxi waiting by the curb. The woman pushed her inside and followed close behind. "Where are we going?" Frempoma asked, feeling a sense of unease as they sped through the crowded streets. The woman smiled, her eyes glinting with amusement. "Somewhere safe," she said, winking at Frempoma. "Somewhere where we can talk without being watched." As the taxi hurtled through the city, Frempoma felt a sense of excitement building inside her. She knew that she was taking a risk by following this woman, but something about her seemed genuine. And as they sped towards their destination, Frempoma couldn't shake off the feeling that she was being watched. The men in black uniforms were still out there, and she knew that they wouldn't give up easily. But for now, at least, she had a chance to uncover the truth. And with this mysterious woman by her side, Frempoma felt like she could take on anything. The taxi pulled up outside a small nondescript building on the outskirts of town. The woman paid the driver and followed Frempoma inside, leading her through a narrow hallway and into a small office that seemed to have been converted from an old storage room. The room was cluttered with files and documents, and there were several people seated around a large table, all of whom looked like they'd been waiting for Frempoma. As the woman introduced herself as Amara, Frempoma's eyes scanned the room, taking in the array of faces and trying to piece together who these people were and what they wanted from her. Amara smiled, seeming to sense Frempoma's unease. "Don't worry," she said, placing a reassuring hand on Frempoma's shoulder. "We're here to help you uncover the truth." But as Frempoma looked around the room, she couldn't shake off the feeling that something was off. These people seemed genuine enough, but there was something about them that didn't quite add up. And then, just as she was starting to relax, Frempoma saw a figure standing in the corner of the room, watching her with cold, calculating eyes. It was a man with piercing blue eyes and jet black hair, and he seemed to be radiating an aura of power and control. Frempoma felt a shiver run down her spine as their eyes met, and she knew that she had stumbled into something much bigger than she had ever imagined. "Who is he?" Frempoma asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Amara followed her gaze, a small smile playing on her lips. "That's Kivu," she said. "He's the one who knows more about your investigation than you do." As Kivu stepped forward, his eyes locked onto Frempoma's, and she felt a surge of fear wash over her. "What do you know?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Kivu smiled, a cold, calculated smile that sent shivers down Frempoma's spine. "I know everything," he said. "And I'm here to tell you that your investigation is just the tip of the iceberg." Frempoma felt a sense of unease building inside her as Kivu began to speak, his words dripping with menace and power. As the room seemed to grow darker and more oppressive, Frempoma realized that she was in grave danger. But for now, at least, she had a chance to uncover the truth. Kivu's words hung in the air like a challenge, and Frempoma felt her heart racing with anticipation. She knew that she had stumbled into something much bigger than herself, but she was determined to see it through. "Go on," she said, her voice steady despite the fear growing inside her. Kivu smiled again, his eyes glinting with amusement. "Let's just say that your investigation has uncovered a few, Irregularities in the system, he said. Irregularities that have far-reaching consequences for the entire country. Frampoma's mind was racing as she tried to piece together what Kivu was saying. What kind of irregularities? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Kivu leaned forward, his eyes locked onto Frampoma's. Corruption, Frampoma, he said. Deep-seated corruption that reaches the highest levels of government and society, and you've stumbled right into the middle of it. Frampoma felt a wave of nausea wash over her as she realized the implications of Kivu's words. She had always known that Bujumbura was a city of contradictions, but she had never suspected that it was this deep. What do you want from me? Frampoma asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Kivu shrugged, his smile growing wider. I want you to know the truth, he said. And I want you to be careful, because once you start down this path, there's no turning back. As Kivu finished speaking, the room seemed to grow quieter, as if everyone was holding their breath in anticipation of what would happen next. Frampoma took a deep breath and looked around the room, trying to take it all in. She saw Amara watching her with a concerned expression, while Kivu's eyes never left hers. Suddenly, the door to the office burst open, and a group of men stormed in, their faces twisted with anger. Kivu, one of them growled, his voice low and menacing. You've been playing with fire for too long. Kivu raised an eyebrow, his smile growing wider. Ah, I see we have some unexpected visitors, he said, his voice dripping with amusement. The man who had spoken took a step forward, his eyes locked onto Kivu's. You're going to regret the day you started messing with Frampoma, he said, his voice low and menacing. Frampoma felt a surge of fear as she realized that these men were not here to talk. They were here to hurt her. But before things could escalate further, Amara stepped forward, her eyes flashing with anger. Leave her alone, she said, her voice firm and commanding. The men paused, their faces twisted with confusion. And for a moment, Frampoma thought that they would back down. But then, one of them spoke up, his voice low and menacing. We don't take orders from you, Amara, he said. Frampoma's heart was racing as the room seemed to grow darker and more oppressive. She knew that she was in grave danger, but she refused to back down. With a surge of adrenaline, Frampoma pushed her chair back and stood up, her eyes locked onto the men. I'm not afraid of you, she said, her voice steady and firm. The men laughed, their faces twisted with amusement. But Frampoma knew that she had just made a powerful enemy. And as they closed in on her, Frampoma realized that she was running out of time. The men closed in on Frampoma, their faces twisted with anger. She stood her ground, her heart pounding in her chest, as they reached out to grab her. But just as all hope seemed lost, a loud crash echoed through the room, followed by the sound of gunfire. The men froze, their eyes darting towards the door. Frampoma took advantage of the distraction to push past them and make a run for it. She sprinted down the hallway, her feet pounding on the floor as she desperately tried to escape. But no matter how fast she ran, the sounds of gunfire grew louder, closer. Suddenly, a figure burst out of the doorway behind her, a gun smoking in his hand. Frampoma didn't dare look back, fearing what she might see. She kept running, her heart racing with fear. She could hear the men shouting behind her, their footsteps pounding on the floor as they gave chase. But then, just when all seemed lost, Frampoma saw a glimmer of light ahead. She burst through the door and out into the night air, gasping for breath as she sprinted down the street. She didn't dare look back, fearing what she might see. But she knew that she had to keep running, no matter where it led. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, Frampoma saw a familiar landmark ahead, the old clock tower on the outskirts of town. She burst through the doors and sprinted up the stairs, her heart pounding in her chest. She reached the top and pushed open the door, revealing a small room filled with dusty old clocks and timepieces. Breathless and shaken, Frampoma collapsed onto a nearby chair, her eyes scanning the room for any sign of danger. But as she looked around, she saw something that made her blood run cold. Aegir was standing in the shadows, watching her. Frampoma's heart sank as she realized that she had been played all along. The man who had come to her aid was not a hero at all, but a pawn in a much larger game. And as she gazed into his eyes, Frampoma saw something there that made her blood run cold. As Frampoma gazed into the man's eyes, she saw a hint of recognition there, a sense that they had met before, under different circumstances. The man stepped forward, his eyes locked onto hers. "You're very brave, Frampoma," he said, his voice low and gravelly. "But you're also very foolish." Frampoma felt a surge of fear as she realized that this man was not here to help her, but to capture her. "You're one of them, aren't you?" she spat, trying to keep her voice steady. The man smiled, his eyes glinting with amusement. "I'm just a messenger," he said. "A messenger from the other side." Frampoma's mind was racing as she tried to piece together what was happening. She had been investigating corruption and deceit in Bujumbura, but she had stumbled upon something much bigger. Suddenly, it all clicked into place. The mysterious messages, the hidden agendas. It was all part of a larger game. The man took a step closer, his eyes locked onto hers. "You see, Frampoma," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "You're not just a journalist. You're a threat to the status quo." Frampoma's heart was racing as she realized that she had to think fast. She knew that she couldn't take on this man alone, but she also knew that she couldn't back down. With a surge of adrenaline, Frampoma stood up, her eyes locked onto the man's. "I'll never back down," she said, her voice steady and firm. The man smiled, his eyes glinting with amusement. "We'll see about that," he said, before reaching out to grab her. But just as all seemed lost, Frampoma heard a loud noise behind her. She turned to see Amara standing in the doorway, a gun smoking in her hand. "Let her go," Amara shouted, her eyes locked onto the man's. The man hesitated for a moment, and then, with a snarl, he lunged at Amara. Frampoma watched in horror as the two men clashed, their bodies crashing to the floor. But she knew that she had to act fast. With a surge of adrenaline, Frampoma grabbed the gun from Amara's hand and pointed it at the man. "Don't move," she said, her voice steady and firm. The man looked up at her, his eyes wild with fear, but he didn't try to move. Instead, he nodded, once, twice. And then, in a flash of insight, Frampoma realized that this was the end. The corruption, the deceit, it was all over. With a sense of closure, Framposa pulled the trigger, feeling a sense of satisfaction as the man fell to the floor. As she stood up, panting, Frampoma knew that her work was done. She had uncovered the truth, and she had brought the corrupt to justice. But as she looked around the room, she saw something that made her heart skip a beat. A small notebook lying on the floor. Frampoma picked it up, flipping through its pages, and what she saw there made her blood run cold. The notebook was filled with names of powerful men and women who had been involved in the corruption. But one name stood out above the rest, a name that Frampoma recognized all too well. It was the name of the president of Bujumbura. Frampoma's eyes widened as she realized that this was just the tip of the iceberg. The corruption went all the way to the top, and it would take more than just one journalist to bring it down. But Frampoma was ready. She knew that she had uncovered a story that could change everything, and she was determined to see it through, no matter what the cost. I hope you enjoyed the story. If so, please like the video, let us know your views in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more enchanting tales just like this one.